Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Incubator booth at NeoHeart 2024. We are joined by none other than Dr. Sam Gentle. Sam, thank you for making time to drop by.
Absolutely. Pleasure seeing you guys.
Pleasure is all ours. I think we met at PS not too long ago, and you're here at NeoHeart giving a talk with a very catchy title. So PDA's hidden impact driving the progression of BPD-associated pulmonary hypertension. Lofty goals.
Yeah, controversial title. I will say that there was a title given to me, and I would have maybe slightly modified it, but yeah, I think it's getting into some of the physiologic plausibility of more of the dose exposure to either a duct or a hemodynamically significant duct over time, and whether that's a meaningful exposure that may put infants at risk for pulmonary hypertension.
I wanted to commend you because you are a neonatologist. You're not a cardiologist.
It's true.
And you're taking on this title at NeoHeart.
It's a little frightening.
It's terrifying.
Me. Yeah. I know. I thought about that in making my talk. I was like, it almost needs to be in my disclosure slide, as Satyan had in his, is like, full disclosure, not a cardiologist, nor do I have hemodynamic training. So I will defer any questions related to those things to others, probably.
I heard they give tomatoes to the audience so that they can.
I hope so. Yeah. Man.
It speaks to your, not just your expertise, but your poise in discussing what I think is a pretty sensitive topic for the community.
Yes, I mean, I've seen quite a mountain of anti-PDA therapeutic intervention talks today, and I will.
Opinions are strong here.
Yes, which I appreciate the strength of opinion. I think there's a lot of evidence to support the strengths of those opinions. I think it's still just. A certain trial has still not gone to completion and looked at pulmonary hypertension as an outcome. So all the PDA trials to date, none of them have looked at pulmonary hypertension as an outcome. And while there is some collinearity, I think, between BPD severity and pulmonary hypertension, the two are not one and the same. And so unless you report that specific outcome, it's very unclear whether PDA therapeutic intervention is related to this specific phenotype of BPD.
And there's something to be said about this acute hemodynamically significant PDA in the first 2 weeks of life that really gives us all this trouble. But when you're talking about BPD-associated pulmonary hypertension, we're talking about pretty much any form of shunting at the level of the PDA, and even these small ones that are just pesky, donut close.
Sure. Bystanders, maybe.
Exactly. But I mean, they cannot be ignored.
Right. I think, and Satyan had a nice, I don't know if y'all probably been in here the whole time, but he had this great talk earlier about the differentiation of the sort of bystander PDA and that sort of angry, maybe pathobiologic PDA, and how do we kind of discern which one's which.
Yeah.
And to me, it's again, sort of a dose effect phenomenon. So while I think that the trials have really demonstrated that early PDA intervention does not seem to be the right thing to do, therapeutic abstention for weeks, months, I don't think that there's data to refute or to endorse that approach. And that's what our analysis that we published in the Blue Journal last year was about. It's not looking at PDA as a binary exposure. It's looking at PDA as the length of that exposure and its relationship with pulmonary hypertension, and try to get to hypothesize a specific duration with which beyond that time point, pulmonary hypertension risk becomes higher and higher. And that time point, it's about 2 to 3 months. If you allow a PDA exposure beyond that time period, your risk for death or BPD pulmonary hypertension is more than 50% or around in that ballpark. Again, this is association, observational data. I need to preface any statement I make based that is, this is not high level of evidence, but I think it's certainly hypothesis generating.
But how much is human cognitive bias playing a role? Because we see these PDAs, we're like, well, it's getting smaller.
Sure.
And then we see these babies that are on invasive, high-frequency ventilation. We're like, well, they're getting better. They're getting extubated.
Right.
And we feel like we're on this path towards full recovery, but we don't anticipate the point where we get stuck. And then we're like, oh, we're stuck on CPAP +5. We can't really wean. And
I wish I had treated that duct last week.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's all kind of hindsight stuff.
Yeah. And so I think that's why this preemptive statistical analysis of saying, well, after this amount of time, this becomes significant is crucially important, because from a human standpoint, we're not good at assessing that unless stats do the job for us.
Yeah, and I think another important part of our analysis is like addressing some of the multicollinearity. So yes, like smaller gestational age and birth weight babies are going to have higher risk for longer PDA. They're also the kids at risk for BPD pulmonary hypertension. But even when we adjust for some of those confounders, gestational age, birth weight, and those sorts of things, presence of a PDA is still a very strong association with BPD pulmonary hypertension.
Yeah.
So it does. We did try to adjust for some of those elements.
And to Ben's point, I think sometimes we get this cognitive dissonance. We didn't treat it. We're just not going to treat it. Do you have any answers about then if we take a different path and after this prolonged exposure followed by some sort of definitive treatment, how does that change outcomes for babies?
Yeah, I'll give you sort of a sense of what my kind of current thinking or approach is, and it's some of that is bled into, I think, our division's practice, not to speak for our division as a whole. But I think in a baby that is on respiratory support from which their lung severity precludes further weaning, and they do have a large duct at sort of like I was mentioning, that 2 months old sort of postnatal time point, I do think intervention potentially at that postnatal age, when it doesn't seem as though spontaneous closure is on the horizon and you're, sort of potentially leaving that kid at risk for continued overcirculation of the developing pulmonary vasculature. I just don't know if, again, it's not informed by high level of evidence, but I think until this, pivotal trial, which is the percutaneous closure at these kind of up until, I think postnatal age 60, looking at alive vent-free days, but also going to assess finally for the outcome of pulmonary hypertension in a PDA closure trial, be kind of one of the first. So I think that's going to be more definitive. I think it's going to take several years for completion of recruitment, but I think that'll give us at least a semblance of an answer.
And it sounds like there are people on both sides of the argument that says there's no controversy left, but it sounds like there's still plenty of us who feel like the conversation's not over on the PDA.
I think early treatment, the controversy's gone. To me, it's about now that the pendulum's going to swing towards therapeutic abstention, and we're going to leave these ducts open for a while. It's the question now becomes, well, then how long is too long? You know.
Any other talks you're looking forward to?
I mean, the big session for me today was anything BPD pulmonary hypertension. I'm thirsting for always. I can't see enough Satyan talks. I mean, I'm giving sort of a worse version of his talk tomorrow. I mean, no, he's just an impossible act to follow, as we all know. He's the best. Let's see. I haven't looked at. I've been so sort of focused on my own talk that I haven't looked at tomorrow's agenda. But
before you can relax.
Yeah. But
the dopamine then comes down the end.
That's right. We've all been there.
Sure. Yeah, but this is my first time here, so it's been really fun for me just to kind of get more of a rich perspective from cardiology presence. I think that's something that's absent to me, at least perspective wise, from some of the other conferences I attend. So that I think it's been really kind of interesting to be a part of that discussion and have kind of a lot of crosstalk, multidisciplinary representation. It's been really cool.
Very nice. Sam, thank you so much for dropping by.
Absolutely.
Wishing you the best remaining of the conference.
Thanks. Great to see y'all.
Good to see you. Bye.
Right.